Hiya and welcome to this week's episode of Inside Property Development, where we're speaking to Dave Hughes again from Hughes Architects, and we're talking about modern methods of construction. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Right, just a quick one. Whether you are a massively experienced and well-established property developer already, or maybe you're a new or aspiring one, either way, you will know that it is really not easy to find viable opportunities to come up with the best scheme, the best design that's going to maximize the land value and fully de-risk things for you, and then to go on to get the very best planning permissions as quickly as possible. However experienced you are, you will know that that is not an easy thing. I have put together a super detailed scorecard based on my 40 years experience in this industry, reverse engineering everything that I've learned, including lots and lots of mistakes over the years, and everything I've done to maintain, touch wood, 100% planning track record. I'm pretty sure there will be stuff that you don't know. Go and do that scorecard. Find out just how good or not your current process is, and I absolutely guarantee you will learn at least a little something, if not a ton. So it's bit.ly/MLA score, all in capitals. You can do the Millbank Land Academy scorecard. I absolutely guarantee you will find some interesting stuff, and it will help you get much better deals. Hiya, and welcome to this week's episode of Inside Property Development, where we are again talking to my old mate Dave Hughes from Hughes Architects. Now, I've had some complaints already about why is he on all the time.
I'm like a co-host now, right?
I said I might let him do a bit of co-hosting here and there because he does actually have some interesting stuff to say.
Oh, thanks.
Now and then, so it is a good opportunity for a chat.
Can I do the subscribe thing at the end?
You can do because we do sometimes have a little bit of a laugh.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. There you go.
Okay, very good. This week, we are talking about modern methods of construction.
Yep.
Which is something I'm really interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you are as well. So what do you want to say?
A couple of things would be quite nice to cover. One is, what's the advantage for developers, SME developers particularly? What's the disadvantage? What's the risks? Because there's there's risks associated with it. So I think let's talk a little bit about that.
Right, let's just jump back a bit. So in terms of what even is modern, what are modern methods of construction? So in my book, it's really anything that's not traditional construction. Traditional construction is what we've been doing for years and years and years. Bricks, blocks, concrete and timber, all of which, or some of which, can and are still incorporated within modern methods of construction. But modern methods of construction is, or can be, a whole load of other stuff as well.
Yeah. The way we look at it is that 95% of what we build is basically sticking components together. We don't, very rarely do you ever make anything bespoke. So with the exception probably of plastering, what you're doing is buying a thing and putting it with another thing to create a building. Mm. And the way that traditional construction works, of course, is we buy lots of very small things, and on a site, we put all those small things together to create the building. And I think the way we look at it is that modern method of construction is about saying, well, can I put all those small things together somewhere else and bring the whole thing to site together? And so it's building nowadays is already very component based. 95% of our, more than that, of our 99% of our job is specifying stuff. We don't design a kitchen, we specify a kitchen that someone buys flat pack and then puts together on site. It's just about, can some of that be done in a factory or off-site or some other way and then brought to site, and bigger components are then assembled together, basically, isn't it? Yeah?
Yeah, although it is that, but obviously we can have modern methods of construction elements incorporated into traditional stuff on site. What's something that you might use quite a lot on site now that you probably didn't really exist 50 years ago? METSEC.
Yep. Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So is that MMC? Well, I mean, when everyone's doing it nearly all the time anyway, it's becoming common.
The example I really like is roof trusses. So only 25 years ago, 30 years ago, all roofs were built with just bits of timber. So you'd have your purlin and you would build your roof. And then someone said, you know what, why don't I do all the rafter bit on the ground? And then for a few years, everyone was making them and then hoisting them up. And then someone else said, oh, actually, look, I could make that in the factory and just go and deliver a load of roof trusses. So roof trusses are a classic of this.
It's a good example.
You know, of where someone's just said, we're going to take all those timber components, we're going to stick them together in the factory, and then we're going to go and drop them in on site. And what then happened is, because they could make them in a controlled environment, they could make all the timber smaller because they didn't need as much of a safety factor because of on-site mucking about. So that got cheaper and it got lighter and it got, much more cost effective. And so therefore that was a really good example of how making things in a factory environment created efficiency and therefore reduced costs. So we really like the timber, rafters or trusses as an example of that from a component point of view.
Yeah, because as a general rule, when it comes to building stuff, we are usually wanting things to be quicker, cheaper, better quality.
Yep.
And if we can get all of those by doing things in a different way, then that's very good, isn't it? Okay, so I know you do quite a lot of this now. Do you want to talk through the MMC definitions?
Yeah. Go on,
some people are very much involved in this. They know exactly what we're talking about. For other people, it's a bit new. For lots of developers, particularly perhaps really small ones, particularly if they are builder contractor developers that are just used to doing things that's a bit more of the old-fashioned way, let's call it.
Yep.
A lot of people, they just stick with what they know.
Yeah, but even then, a lot of developers we find are using timber frame manufacturers, for instance. So that's a type of MMC. They're skinning it on site, so it's a normal bricklayer and all the rest of it, but they're getting it built out of timber frame.
Yeah.
And the component bits, so floor cassettes or roof cassettes or whatever else it might be. But look, if I go through some categories, and the categories came about from a funding point of view. So the government wanted to put a bunch of money into MMC. And so they commissioned a bunch of reports like they normally do. Are you going to interrupt me?
I'm going to stop you. Let's perhaps worth jumping back just before that to perhaps talk about why this has become really important and labour and skills shortages.
Yeah.
So short version is, apprenticeships went out the window for years and years and years. Massive, massive mistake that was, right? So not enough people getting trained in the construction industry, and obviously lots of foreign labour that was great and was here for a while and then it disappeared and whatever. So lots of issues with skills and labour, yeah?
Look, everyone's talking about the housing crisis now and labour's going to do this and that and the other. This thing's been going on for about 50 odd years, mate. Every government has got some fabulous new target for building houses. So the idea of there not being enough skills to do it and needing additional, and I think this is important to say, it's an additional way of doing it, not a better or worse or replacement way of doing it. It's just an additional way of doing it. So the government said, well, look, we're going to really promote this. So we're going to put a bunch of money in. So there was quite a few schemes that if they were Homes England funded, they had to meet certain criteria. And so the government commissioned a report, and it was done by a guy called Mark Farmer. It became the Farmer Report, owned a company called Cast, who are very industry leading. And he came up with these categories. Category 1 is what they call 3D primary structural systems, which is a Ponzi way of saying it's three-dimensional thing. So it's a
modular boxes.
Yeah, so it's a box, of something. So and that's your sort of top thing. So volumetric boxes, and there's all sorts of terminology, and some of them are interchangeable. But anyway, a box, right? So that's your category 1. And so that when people think of craning in houses, that's normally what they think of, is that category 1 MMC. Category 2 is two-dimensional pre-manufacture, so panels generally. So SIPs panels or any sort of panelized system. What happens is that as you go down the list, you get more flexibility. So category 1, least flexible through the duration of the project. Category 6, the most flexible. Yeah. Category 3 was components, things like floor cassettes. Most stuff that we buy on sites are now category 3s. Yeah. And then 4 was things just to do with more to do with process and the way of working. So 4, 5, and 6 are really to do with the way that we work. And to be honest, most of it's being done already. So no one really talks much about those categories. So, so 1, 2, and 3 are really the main ones that we all talk about. In fact, 1 and 2 mainly are the ones we talk about. Yeah.
So boxes, panels, and bits and pieces.
Basically, yeah. Very good. You should send Mark an invoice for that.
I read his report a long time ago and remembered most of it.
The point of the system, the point of the development life that you need to start making decisions are different depending on which category you go for. Yeah. So if we just talk a little bit, actually, let me redo that, Ryan, because we'll talk about this a bit later about how the procurement system isn't set up for MMC because of the way cash flow works in funding to do with stage payments.
Yeah.
No, but I just want to cover off this first bit.
That's fine. You don't talk to the camera.
No, I'm not talking to the camera. Talking to the camera.
Or that man over there, because then we have to cut this. We
No,
won't even leave this in here.
Let's just leave it
for you to get the lesson. Don't talk to the camera.
So, where was I? What was I saying?
Exactly. Just carry on wherever you was.
So, if you want to go category 1, so a box, you need to decide really early in the process that that's the box you want to use.
Yeah.
We're just going to go as a little aside on category 1 volumetric. There's different ways of doing it. And the way we like to describe it is, one is a pre-designed product, a box. So this was companies like Ilka or Top Hat, where they had designed a house and they said, come and buy type 2 or type 3 of the house. And you decided they're the houses you want and you put them on the site, right? And that comes as a box. The other way of looking at it would be what we call a factory build. So you still design it, but then it gets built in the factory to your specification. Yeah. So that's you got a bit more flexibility there.
Yeah. So you've got the Ilka or whoever it might be. So they've got their standard modules, let's call it.
It's an actual house, a standard house. The layout is fixed, the bathroom position is fixed, and all you say is, I want red brick on the outside, and I want this sort of roof, and I want this avocado bathroom, or whatever it may be. Yeah. So that's the sort of, if you like, the most extreme end of the volumetric world is an actual house.
Exactly. And interestingly, it's by no accident that's the stuff that's gone down the pan.
Correct. And we'll talk a bit about why it's difficult in risk terms. Then sort of just below that is if you like, a factory built house. So you design the house, but it gets built in boxes in the factory. And it might be that depending on who you use, they say, well, we have a standard staircase or a standard bathroom or whatever, but then you can move walls around. And so that's, if you like, a factory built house, but it still comes to site as a box. So for both those two, you need to decide very early on in the process that that's what you're going to do, because it can't be changed on site. It can't be changed. Once it's in the factory, it can't be changed. So it has a very low flexibility. So you get a huge amount of efficiency and therefore cost saving. And there's massive amounts of other advantages to do with reduced waste, lower carbon. There's all these other benefits of doing it. But the sacrifice is flexibility, is you can't halfway through the construction say, actually, I fancy that door being over there, not here, right? Which on a traditional build you can, because you're only ever putting small components together. So that's sort of most efficient, least flexible. The next one down is then panels, which again are all made in a factory and they all slot together. And again, that gives you quite a lot of design flexibility. We still need to decide quite early on that's the system you're going to use, because again, it's not easily changeable. And then you get down to the component base. And I think one of the big risks and one of the worries for people is that if I'm building a house and my plumber doesn't turn up because he's gone bankrupt, I can open Google and easily find another plumber. No problem at all. But if I buy a factory build house that's very specifically that factory that's building it and that system, and they go bankrupt, I'm suddenly really in the shit. And I think that's one of the risks that we have to be aware of when we use this sort of factory build stuff. Have you got, how's your experience been with that risk assessment, if you like, from a development point of view?
At the right time, maybe at the end, I'll come on and tell you
some horror stories.
No, not horror stories, because I've luckily enough, touched wood, managed to avoid any horror stories by realising what could go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the balance that you have to take with yourself. You say to yourself, do I want the efficiency, the speed, much, much quicker, miles quicker, the less wastage? I know the quality is going to be good because it's built in a factory environment, so it's not pissing it down with rain in the middle of winter and no one can be asked to do the job properly. They're in a nice factory environment.
Yeah.
And am I willing to accept the risk and also the lack of flexibility? So we do a lot of volumetric, but panelized, I think, is a really good middle option for SME developers because there's more of them around. So you can get more tenders, so therefore you can, there's a bit more competition in the marketplace. None of it's really new technology, it's pretty understandable technology, and it has an inbuilt flexibility to it, but it's still super quick compared to traditional. So we do a lot of panelized. We like panelized a lot. The other thing is things like site access. So if you're doing boxes, you obviously need to get a crane and all the rest of it, whereas with panelized, you don't. So panelized, I think, is a really, really good way of doing things. As I say, the big advantage of the boxes is it's even quicker and the quality is very good. But it is high risk for them, and loads of them have gone bankrupt. A crazy amount of them have gone bankrupt, which is very sad. That's really something to bear in mind, particularly if you're an SME developer, I think. This is the bit where you say, why do you think they've gone bankrupt, Dave?
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
All right. Why have they gone bankrupt?
I'll tell you why, Paul. Thanks for asking. Because our industry...
And then I'll tell you as well.
Okay. Our industry...
Just in case you get it wrong.
...has been developed over 200 years, whatever it may be, right? Everything in our industry is set up to build stuff in the traditional way. Yeah. So the way funding works, the way pricing works, tender works, contracts are placed, and everything is set up in a way that reflects how we used to build. So basically, it would be, I'm going to build this house. And the funding people say, well, that's fine. I'll give you enough money just to do the foundations. And once you've done the foundations, I'll come and check them and I'll give you some more money. And then that money will pay for the next bit of wall and I'll come and check it. And that's fine when you're building on site. The problem is when you're building in a factory and there's nothing on site. So the valuation process has to work differently. The industry then said, well, okay, we can get around that by basically saying, well, we'll come to the factory and we'll look at it in the factory and we'll sign it off. And that's what happens. So along the line, they come along and they say, yeah, we can see you've built that module. You can have a bit more money. So that theoretically is working okay. The problem is that if I set myself up as a builder, my cash flow outgoings at the beginning are hardly anything. I don't have any, my place of work is a building site. So it's a project specific place, right? And I only spend a little bit of money before I get some more money given to me by the valuation people. And even then, I'm not really spending it because all of the components I'm buying through other companies, subcontractors. So all the plasterboard's a plasterboard contractor and the kitchen's a kitchen person. And again, until I get paid, they don't get paid. So all this risk is getting spread everywhere. And as I say, if one of them goes under, you fill the gap, no problem. If I'm going to set up a factory though, I have to pay all of those costs for all of those people and all that equipment before I get anything in return. And so my overheads and my investment costs at the beginning is phenomenal. And so all of these guys were carrying a huge amount of debt to get themselves set up in the first place. Yeah. And so what happened is as soon as there was delays in the system, and we've talked endlessly about planning delays and various delays, they suddenly were hemorrhaging money because they're still employing. It's not like saying to Jim the plasterer, I've got no work for you this week. Can you pop along to a different site? Your factory guys are turning up day in, day out. So the costs are going out. The lack of certainty that is needed in the manufacturing process compared to what we normally have in the building process is a real disconnect. And that's, I think, where a huge amount of these problems have come from. What's your experience been?
So it's worth mentioning, you think where modular does work really well, right? Student accommodation, hotel pods, build to rent.
Yeah, affordable housing.
So basically, things where you have got pretty much a guaranteed exit.
Yep.
That's not speculative, really. And importantly, certainly in terms of student accommodation, hotels, etc., build to rent, you want to get them up and income generating ASAP. So it's a slightly different model. And of course, you've got lots and lots of repetition. Student accommodation being the classic. You've got a load of units exactly the same around the core or whatever. Yeah, absolutely perfect for that stuff. When it now comes to housing, it's a different model.
The private sale housing.
Well, yeah, private sale housing, and even within private sale housing, there's a whole massive range of people building a single house on a little plot, or people, perhaps small developers, a bit more like me, maybe trying to build 8 or 20 on a little site, where the name of the game is absolutely being super detailed, super bespoke, squeezing every single square foot out of that site in order to maximise the land value and actually get the deal to work, where almost by definition, trying to fit square boxes on something like that is the last thing that's going to work.
Yeah, for sure. Certainly smaller sites are very difficult. Big fields, which are flat and have got 500 of exactly the same, roughly the same thing. Maybe there's 4 or 5 house types.
Yeah.
That's not reliant on sales rates. All day long, no problem at all. And I think this was the other big red herring when the government started talking about the need to do modular. No one's talked about sales rates. So all these modular guys were saying, "Hey, we could deliver 50 of these a week," and everyone said, "Well, I don't want 50 a week because I can't sell them. I can only sell 2 a week. Doesn't matter how good my marketing is. Even in top market, you might do 3 a week." So there's no point in you delivering all of these. I would rather build slower. And I think there's the other thing with the flexibility of traditional build, you can speed up and slow down.
Exactly.
So from a sales rate point of view, I think anything that relies on sales rates, volumetric itself, the box category 1, isn't the right thing to do. Category 2 is, though, because that is just bigger components. And
I agree.
But yes, you're right. From a rental income point of view, then category 1 does work because, as you say, it's all about speed to get the rental income coming. So yes, it's not one of these where it's like, oh, let's all just go and buy a house off the shelf. It'll be brilliant. It doesn't work that way. It's sort of saying, well, what am I trying to do with it? What's my site situation? What's my exit strategy? What's the purpose of this? What's the mortgageability of it, or what's the warranties on it? And again, it's this classic thing of, doesn't matter how many times the council and mortgage lenders say, "Oh yeah, don't worry, we'll mortgage modular." As soon as you're a Joe Bloggs trying to do a mortgage application and you say it's come off the factory, they're hold up a second, all sorts of problems, isn't there?
Yeah.
And you get the mortgage eventually. It's just a real pain in the arse to get there compared to, I've just gone and bought a Bellway house around the corner. Other house builders are available. Actually,
it's not new. No. It's really, really old. But I guess, both modular and all sorts of modern methods of construction. I mean, like after Second World War, prefab's massive, right? Yeah. So it's not new, actually. But what is new is the fact that it's trying to be pushed really in a big way.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, even though it's still happened slowly.
Yeah.
So, like you say, council mortgage lenders, classic things like that, warranty providers trying to get their head around it. Everyone wants to cover their arse. Oh, well, that's not how we normally do it. They don't say that. No. They say, "Oh yeah, no problem," until you try to do it, and then it is a problem. Funders as well.
Yeah, and coming back to this thing about why they kept going under, is it was the bigger ones. It was the ones who were investing huge amounts of money and millions of VC money in the big factories.
Yeah.
And what we've seen in the last year or 2 is much smaller, low-tech kind of factories springing up. So rather than spending 10 million quid on robots, it's, let's start small. Let's make sure we can keep the line going, because that's they all talk about no gaps in the line. Let's keep the line going without this massive overhead of all this money we've got from venture capitalists. And I think that's will, organically grow a little bit better. Yeah. I think going on to category 2, though, panelized, brilliant. All day long, brilliant. It's quicker than traditional. It's much more efficient, much less wastage, and yet it's got all the flexibility that you want. You design your house, you get it panelized up in CAD, and 6 weeks later, all these timber panels turn up. You plug them all together, and I think it's great. And I think for smaller developers, it's a really, really good way of doing it.
I agree. So I absolutely think that's sort of the way forward. But I'll tell you what's interesting to point. I'm just going to Google here now. I was telling someone about this the other day, that I asked them when they were born, and it was 1989.
Right.
That was a young person, and they had no idea what I was talking about.
And that's not that young anymore, mate.
Is it not?
No.
Oh, right.
I have people in my office who were, like 2004.
I'm trying to, I'll tell you what I'm trying to get the date of. There you are, 1983. World in Action. Remember that?
Yeah, I do. And it was, didn't they leak or fall down or something?
Wow. So basically what happened, and I remember this, in 1983, I couldn't remember the dates, that's why I just had to Google it. There was a World in Action program about Barrett's, who I used to work for, and that's where we first started doing stuff, actually.
Yeah.
Basically, timber frame had a whole load of issues, a whole load of problems. Interesting, a bit like, it's nothing like Grenfell, but the whole point about, there was a big scandal, let's call it, and as a result of that, timber frame fell out of favour for years.
Yeah.
So again, it's not new. There was a time when not everyone, a lot of stuff was going timber frame, and then there was the big hoo-ha, and then it disappeared for years, and now it's back, and it's good.
Yeah,
done the right way.
Yeah, for sure. It's like anything but done the right way, isn't it? I think. I do remember, and they'd all got rotten or something, hadn't they? There was all sorts of problems with water ingress. Got rotten and all that stuff.
And interestingly, actually, whatever you're doing, timber frame, traditional, all the various modern methods of construction, if the quality control and workmanship is bad, anything can go wrong.
Absolutely.
Obviously, whatever you're doing.
Oh, and this is one of the advantages of factory build, for sort of like an umbrella term.
Yeah.
Is that the quality control can be much better because it is a much more controlled environment. You're not having different gangs of tradespeople coming and doing different bits, and everyone's working together. It's in a dry environment and all the rest of it. So there is a quality control, and also a reduced wastage is the big thing with you really managed to reduce that. So it's a bit like all of these things in construction, isn't it? That people come up with these things and say, oh, this is going to solve the crisis. Of course it's not, but it is going to help in parallel with other things, But certainly I would advise that everyone looks at category 2 stuff. I think it really works well.
Certainly for private sale, speculative housing, and lots of other things as well. I actually like panelized stuff the best. Interesting though, it's worth mentioning. At the end of the day, right, developers, we've got to get deals to stack up. So, build cost is a massive, actually now certainly more than I can ever remember. It's really, build costs have gone up crazy the last few years. It's one of the things that's made development less and less viable. If it's cheaper to build something traditionally, then the incentive is going to be there to build it traditionally because we're more likely to be able to get the deal to stack up by the land. Now, interestingly, I think this is important thing to emphasize, is that with a lot of this MMC stuff, when you look at it sort of on a like-for-like basis, you're just comparing, I don't know, a ground floor panel with that eastern wall of the house, right? And you look at the price of that, and then you look at the price if you built it in bricks and blocks, and obviously you've got your inner skin and insulation and all the rest of it, right? But with a lot of stuff on a like-for-like basis, depending on what it is, sometimes the MMC stuff can look more expensive. Yeah. But of course, it's nearly all quicker and, like so, very often better quality and all the rest of it, as we know. So one of the things that I know not a lot of developers or all developers are really good at is properly factoring in the related savings in terms of obviously finance costs, getting stuff built quicker, getting sales in quicker, and that is very often the thing that flips the viability when you're doing stuff like that,
It's that experience of saying, I've run my viability and on paper, it costs me this much, right? But 99 times out of 100, there's going to be a bit of delay here or a bit of delay there, and that's going to cost me a bit extra.
Yeah.
So my real viability is actually down here, not this paper one.
Yeah.
And when I now compare my real one to the certainties I get from using some factory built stuff, it then suddenly starts making sense. But I think it's very difficult if you're on the margins of your viability to say, well, why am I pricing in a what if? Do you know what I mean?
I do know
think,
but
me and you both know hundreds of people who have got caught out on this. This is the problem, is that, you know, as soon as you start building something goes wrong, and that's fine. That's just the nature of the game. But it's about making sure you're covering yourself on doing that. And
it is.
What the factory build does do is it reduces a lot of the technical risks, and the, you know, people not turning up or whatever else it may be. Having said the thing about, you know, a bunch of them go bankrupt, if they, you know, at least you can go to the factory and you can see it being built. There it is, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know if I've told you, I've got a podcast called Inside Property Development.
Right, okay.
Have you heard about it?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
Okay. Do you listen to it or watch it?
Only if I'm on it.
Only if you're on it. I thought that might be the case.
No, it isn't the case, because I've listened to your one about viability.
That's what
See
I
what
was
I
going
did
to say.
there?
Very
eh?
good. I did. So no, but seriously, so one of the things with that is to help people like do those quick calculations and think, well, oh, actually, blimey, that system is, I don't know, boutique modern, right? I know you like them. I like them. I've been to their factory, really good, right? Oh, look, well, they've got something that would actually work really well on this site. I know exactly what it costs. And maybe then, of course, they can design that in at the start.
Yeah.
Because, of course, one of the other problems is, and this happens a lot, people don't think about that at the start, how they're going to build it. You know, they'll go away, get an architect, get them to do a scheme. If it's the right architect and the right developer, they will come up with a good scheme that maximises the land value. But that won't necessarily be designed to suit any specific system.
Exactly, yeah.
Unless it's thought about and can be factored in and thought about and all the options considered at that very beginning stage.
Yeah. But this comes back to that flexibility and efficiency. And if you want the flexibility to keep changing your mind, it's going to cost you more money. There's no point in pretending it isn't. But if you start making decisions earlier, even though you're locking stuff in, it means you can really interrogate that thing and get that as cost efficient as you possibly can early doors. Yeah. Which in this current climate for SME developers makes a difference between it being viable or not.
Absolutely.
You know, it's with margins being the way they are, it's not, you know, the old days where we had a load of fat in there and the market was growing so much that you could fuck up a couple of times throughout a project. It's not like that anymore. You know, you have to get these things really locked in early doors so that you're getting it as fixed as you possibly can, you know?
Yeah, you do. And of course, there are lots of other advantages now in terms of, you know, carbon being measured on, you know, planning lots of applications and stuff.
You can quite easily analyze that as a time planning risk. So you can say your planning's hard enough as it is. Am I going to make my life more difficult by putting in a cheap gas boiler, which I know I'm going to get pushed back on, which is going to delay me further, and I'm going to dick around for another 2 months, which is cost me more money. Why don't, even though on paper it looks cheaper, it's not, because by the time you've mucked about, you're still going to end up building the more expensive version anyway. So again, I think it's all those hidden costs and delays and all the rest of it, which really catch people out, that, you know, it is what makes the paper, you know, utopian ideal viability 9 times out of 10 not being the final one, is it? Because all this other stuff comes up, you know.
So how much of your stuff now are, because I know you do loads for HAs now, don't you?
Yeah.
Is incorporating this type of stuff?
What, modular?
All the different modular, Cat 2, whatever it might be.
The vast majority is probably Category 2 panelized. Different councils and RPs do different things. Everyone starts with a position of saying that they would like to investigate it. But, you know, house associations are exactly the same as a private developer. It still has to be viable. You know, the figures still have to add up. It's not, they don't have all this secret money to do all this extra stuff. They don't. So they're having the same conversations about, if I build trad, it's going to be cheaper. So is it worth it? But yes, because of X, Y, and Z other reasons, you know. The slight difference, I think, is because they retain the product, they don't sell it. They have a bit more skin in the game to do with longer term maintenance and all the rest of it. The other thing is they're very risk averse. So this idea of, you know, that the modular companies, particularly the Category 1 modular companies, really do struggle to stay afloat because of the external pressures that are delaying things for them, is a major issue for most clients that we work with.
Yeah.
Because they just don't want to take risk, you know. We were doing some work with Greenwich, and on one site, I think we're on our 5th modular provider.
Oh, really? Wow.
Just keep going bankrupt.
Blimey.
You know, we had the first one. I think they went bankrupt even before we started on site. We then got some foundations in, but they went bankrupt. And, you know, it just went on. And on that one, I think we might now just be building trad, you know, or category 2 stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just a bit sadder story, really, you know. But again, it's one of those where they really wanted to do volumetric. They really wanted to see how it worked and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I think so. Most of them are still being fairly like wanting to do it sort of philosophically, but then, you know, being quite pragmatic about doing it in the right way and the right time, you know.
So talk to me about procurement on typically on this stuff, because I know what you and me, we had a chat the other day about planning, because, you know, obviously I know you from years ago when you worked for another excellent practice that were really good on planning, and obviously they did all the production stuff as well, Cell, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But now you were telling me the other day you're nowhere near as big on planning as you used to be.
No, we've become, just generally as a practice, we're a lot more technical than we used to be. We find the planning, particularly in London, we wanted really to give a bit of stability to the business. So although construction itself is not the most stable, you know, if we wanted stable industry, we wouldn't be working in this, would we? But at least it's sort of, you know, you've got the project, you do the tender, you know, it's a longer piece of work each time. So
yeah, so typically now, so what happens? An HA or someone will come to you and say, well, we've just got consent for this, I don't know, 50 houses, or I don't know what it might be. Can you tender for the working drawings? Basically,
it tends to be through the contractor.
Oh, actually, yeah. So that was it.
So
right, okay.
what normally happens is most HAs and councils have frameworks with architects on them. They'll do the planning, and then in post planning they'll go to market, and it'll be contractors. And then the contractors are appointed for what's called pre-construction service agreement, PCSA, which is basically like the working drawings bit. And then that's where we get appointed through the contractor.
Oh, so interesting. And that'd be design and build, will it?
Yeah. 99.9% of what we do is design and build. You know, we've talked before about star architects and architects who don't know what they're doing, and cravat wearing and all the rest of it. And one of the downsides of the frameworks, particularly with councils, is they're led by, in councils in particular, led by politicians who like the big name, like the, you know, shiny architecture, and unfortunately are not getting advised very well at the additional costs that brings and all the rest of it. And we've got a project at the moment, and it's a classic where they've got planning and we're saying, okay, to build this, it's not unbuildable, but it is unbuildable in any reasonable way. Okay. And it's one of these classics where the planning architect is saying, but I've seen it done in design, you know, and I've got design's a real bugbear of mine about this. Yes, it is technically doable, but not for this product. And this particular example is to do with fire. And without boring you to death with all the technicalities of it, it eventually means that you need a fire curtain in someone's house, right? The maintenance of a fire curtain within a social housing is just bonkers. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And no house association would ever sign up to that. But to technically do what they want in design terms, that's what you need to do. So yes, I totally agree. There is an example of a private house in design where someone's got this because they're happy to have a fire curtain. This client isn't.
Well, not only that, and they can afford it.
Exactly. And I think, and so there's, you know, that's one of the tensions that we find is that. But we also do design work for particularly RPs, which are not framework. Some of the smaller projects aren't framework, or some of the very specialist stuff that we do is not framework. So we can do some of that as well. The other good thing about the category 2 stuff is it gives you much more variety in what you can do. You know, even though it's a system of building, it's a much more flexible one than volumetric. And I think one of the things that we all struggled to get our head around with volumetric was just the sameness of it. Because obviously, you know, you don't want loads and loads of different types. And so, and this is where people like your house builders, your countryside, your Bellways, your Barrett, your Red Rose and all that are actually really good. A lot of their house types in plan terms and construction terms are pretty similar, but what they're really good at is saying, we're going to put a bay window on this bit and we're going to do a different roof on this bit and we're going to do this, that and the other. And I think some of the criticism of volumetric and category 1 was that they were all a bit samey.
I've got to say, actually, just on that, one of the things I really don't like about them is you can tell, can't you? It's like
boxes. Yeah,
it's hard to get them to look good.
It's a veneer over a box.
Yeah.
What you don't get is a lot of overhangs, for instance, just because of the way the thermal bridging works in technical terms. It's quite difficult, and so it's easier just not to do that. And panelized is the same. Panelized is quite rigid, and so again, you're trading that flexibility and efficiency. And if you have a particularly odd shape site, the way to maximize value is to do a non-standard house type to fit on a particular site. But yes, there is the downside of efficiency means doing the same thing again and again and again. But the downside of that is it always looks like the same thing again and again and again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, which is why, again, it lends itself to student housing or hotels or all the rest of it, where, it is all about that efficiency. And then you just apply this sort of veneer of facade on it, So, I think that's something that that was kind of overlooked in the early days of, isn't it all brilliant? We all should be building out a factory sort of thing, And there's enough criticism already in development and house building and architecture about sameness, I think, particularly in bigger projects, isn't there? So, it's definitely something that I think everyone needs to bear in mind about trying to reflect the local area and stuff.
I think the full modular is...
There's a place for it, but it's not the holy grail that I think we all thought 5-6 years ago when the government were chucking loads of money at it, that's for sure.
Yeah. Do you remember my little plan I had for my little Croydon site?
Yep.
Did I tell you about it?
Yeah, this is the viability thing though, wasn't it?
No.
This is another company.
No, this is another thing. I'll tell you in case you've forgotten. So, really little site in Croydon you got planning for me a few years ago. I've actually gone back and tied up a couple of other little bits of land to get a slightly bigger scheme. Yeah, yep. It's only a little one. It's only 5 houses, but I want to design. It's just because I just like doing interesting stuff now, right? Where I can do something a bit different and learn some stuff as well. An off-site manufactured Cat 2 kit house.
Yep.
Yeah. That. Will be super efficient on that site. It's a specific 3-bed house type that I know will just work really well on lots of other sites. I mean, obviously every site's different, and you need a little bit. So what I actually want to invent, and I know there's lots of other people doing this as well. Couple of 2 beds, couple of 3 beds, couple of 4 beds. Whether we sell the design or whatever, you've got the working drawings, you've got all of the components, you got all of the panels, which then can be gone and bought from lots of different manufacturers all over the place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like a super sustainable off-site manufactured kit house that other people can then buy and use and factor in that design.
Who makes the panels?
Whoever makes them.
Oh, okay, fine. So it's not you're not
panel makers, not me,
but you're not reinventing the panel system.
I'm not going to be making panels.
So you're just collecting a bunch of components together, putting it into a pattern book,
a specific house type. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A pattern book, effectively.
Yeah, the Georgians did this,
I know.
So the original Georgian houses were a pattern book where you would then pick out, I want that type of fireplace, that type of brick, and the developer would go and build it. So we'll do that. Yeah. And we're going to use the Croydon one as a test bed.
Yeah, because I'll tell you for why. And as you know, I've got another business that trains other developers and stuff like that. One of the things I talk about a lot is, maximising land values, optimising schemes, and all the rest of it. One of the key things, and all of that, which I know for a fact lots of other developers don't do and they get wrong, is they don't do their market research right.
Mm-hmm.
So they come up with the wrong mix, the wrong size of homes, right? I don't do that. I'm super detailed. I analyse the shit out of everything, and I know if all of the sites I've ever developed over the years, or even been involved in getting planning for and developing for other people, if the house that works the most often and is the optimum house type for most sites, if I could only build one house type for the rest of my career, it would be a 3-bed, 6-person of just over 1,000 square feet with a very specific configuration. Yeah. Surprise, surprise, or maybe not, because it is the house type that works the best. That is exactly the house type based on the market research that works the best for my little Croydon site. So I thought, actually, do you know what I mean? I might as well design this pattern for that, and then one, it'll be interesting, and two, I can use it elsewhere. I can sell the design. Other people can use it elsewhere.
And it's quite an America thing, isn't it? In America, they do this. You buy kit houses quite a lot.
They do,
but we've got much bigger land, much more land. No, I know.
Exactly.
They're big ranch houses. I know that. They're different size, but they do. You are this. It's much more common, I think, to then say I've bought some land and I'm going to buy a house as a private owner, occupier. But you're saying it from a pattern book of other developers could then say, well, and I suppose the big advantage is, as long as you index link it on inflation, you always know how much it's going to cost.
And it's almost like, and again, coming back to people that don't know, a lot of people slag off the big developers, right? Some of them are shit, but some of them are actually, we had the Barrett house type book.
Yep.
There's about 150 different house types in it. Our patch was London. So most of the time I wasn't looking at any of those standard house types because they weren't going to work on a site in Chiswick. We did have the house type book and it was quite interesting to see how it all worked. And with that house type book, every little screw down to the last, now the number, everything, they knew exactly what was in. So you knew exactly what your costs were.
Yeah. And also efficiency, because they were buying the same bedroom door times 10,000.
They were buying the same stuff all the time. The people on site were building the same thing all the time.
Exactly, yeah.
So, I know people slag off identikit, housing developments, and so do I, right? Because I like good design, and so do you. It doesn't have to be that way, actually. There is a way of making that big stuff good, and some people do it, and more developers are coming to do it now. So, not all volume housing is right, but there is a reason that they do it that way to make it much more
cost effective, yeah.
Most of the time, smaller developers can't do the stuff and therefore benefit from those designs and those efficiencies because they're not doing enough of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But with come up with a little bit of a clever pattern book that I know or we know or can work out is going to work on 80% of sites because it's designed the right width, the right length, the right square footage, etc.
Do any house builders would they sell you their kit? Like, could I ring up, Western Homes and say, I've got a little bit of land. Can I have a Chelmsford or whatever it is? Can you give me 2 of them, please? They don't, do they?
I wouldn't have thought so.
None of them would do it.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You go to the opposite end of the scale. You look at self-builders.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are kit houses. You can go to Potton or someone like that will sell you a Chelmsford or whatever it might be.
Yeah, there are. But I suppose, it's that bit in the middle, isn't it? Because a lot of the self-build stuff are quite big.
They're all big.
Money, aren't they? Yeah. So yes, I suppose that kit house, which is for targeting developers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do it.
Anyway, so that's it. All right, we'll wrap it up there.
I get to say it, right, because I'm co-host now.
Oh yeah, go on then.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much. How was that? Was that okay?
That's very good. Thanks for tuning in to Inside Property Development. Please remember to like and subscribe. Do join us every week where we'll be speaking to house builders, developers, experts, planners, and everyone involved in trying to get more much needed housing created the right way. We'll learn together how we can collaborate rather than fight, and by working together, we can all help create better places, spaces, and homes, and a much more beautiful world.